working to connect a region of over 600 more bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. On today's headlines, President Duterte says the government has no business to lie to the people about the coronavirus situation in the country.
The reason why is there is
The Indonesian capital sees less traffic after authorities have reimposed a partial coronavirus lockdown and vowed to strictly isolate anyone testing positive for COVID-19.
to listen to us.
Again, President Duterte said he won't pay reservation fee for any COVID-19 vaccine because it is against the law.
Like in
And the Department of Foreign Affairs confirmed that no Filipino has been reported hurt by the recent forest fire incidents across the United States West Coast. First, President Duterte said his government has no business on lying to the people about the coronavirus situation in the country. Let's listen in.
ang COVID virus is still around. And the reason why is there is less ratio and proportion between other countries. Mababa talaga tayo. You should know that. And huwag ho sana kayong maniwala dyan sa mga dilawan, opposition, na hampas dito, hampas doon, kung anong pinagsasabi. For as long as the virus lives in this planet, we are put in real danger. Kayo naman, kung maniwala kayo, you get to be despondent or, ano sa buhay, put more stress. Huwag po kayong maniwala dito lang. Kami dito lahat, Senator Go, Secretary Galvez, Secretary Roque, Secretary Lorenzana, Secretary Anyo, we are not here. We did not join government to lie. We do not have any obligation at all to lie. Bakit kami magsinungaling na hindi namin trabaho yan at hindi naman kami pumasok sa trabaho para yan lang magsinungaling. Baski grade 1, grade 2, alam na namin kung ano ang pagmamahal sa bayan. So I hope that everybody would listen to reason.
The President explained that the threat of COVID-19 is still in the country, even though the Philippines has a fewer number of cases compared to other countries. To date, the Philippines has recorded 265,888 and deaths of 4,630. First, let's head on over to Vietnam, where the weather says they are going to see heavy rains until the end of the week. Plus, the latest situation in the country. Joining us live from Vietnam is Eliana Faith Sebastian. Hello, Eliana.
Good afternoon, Alma.
Good afternoon. Go ahead.
Here are the latest updates here in Vietnam. First, southern Vietnam is to see heavy rains all week. Ho Chi Minh City and other southern localities are expected to experience heavy rains until this weekend following a combination of two low-pressure areas. Due to the influence of a low-pressure trench off the south-central coast, combined with the tropical low-pressure region to the east of the Philippines, strong seasonal winds are expected to cause heavy rains across Ho Chi Minh City and the southern region, especially between Wednesday and Saturday, said Ledin Kut, deputy head of the forecasting office under the Hydrometeorological Observatory for the southern region. The average volume of rainfall is forecast to reach 30 to 60 millimeters or more in 24 hours, with falling trees and flooding to be expected in certain areas of the city. Southern Vietnam, including Ho Chi Minh City, is experiencing its annual rainy season, which normally lasts from late April to November, and for years, Ho Chi Minh City has suffered flooding each time it rains heavily. In those cases, scenes of motorcyclists wading through water and cars stuck along the streets have become common sights. Could ascribe the fog in Ho Chi Minh City on recent days to air humidity, remaining at more than 93% as measured in Nabed district in early Monday morning. He confirmed that high humidity in the air along with dust nucleus and salt crystals lay behind the fog, comparing the mechanism to the formation of clouds. Kuyat added that this is a normal weather condition that has no significant impacts on human health, unlike the haze formed by ash from forest fires or air pollution. He also said that how long the fog will last will depend on cloud and sunshine conditions. The more clouds and less sunshine, the longer it would remain, and vice versa. Another update, Alma, Financial Inclusion Steering Committee set up. Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc has signed a decision to set up the Financial Inclusion Steering Committee, or the FISC. The FISC is an interagency body with three primary functions as follows: providing strategic directions, policies, plans, and solutions for development of financial inclusion, overseeing implementation of the National Strategy for Financial Inclusion, and putting forward orientations on international cooperation in financial inclusion. The committee is chaired by Prime Minister Phuc, and the Governor of the State Bank of Vietnam is the Vice Chairman. Members of the committee comprise representatives of the Government Office, the State Bank of Vietnam, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Planning and Investment, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, the Ministry of Education and Training, the Ministry of Industry and Trade, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Information and Communication, the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Ministry of Public Security, the Ministry of Labor and Valets and Social Affairs, among others. The State Bank of Vietnam is the permanent body of the FISC. According to the World Bank, financial inclusion means that individuals and businesses have access to useful and affordable financial products and services that meet their needs. Transactions, payments, savings, credit, and insurance delivered in a responsible and sustainable way. Financial inclusion has been identified as an enabler for 7 out of 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you very much, Sheliana, for your updates there in Vietnam.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting live from Da Nang, Vietnam, this is Aliana Page Sebastian, who live in interesting times.
To Cambodia now, where churches are now allowed to reopen after a 6-month closure, and the Cambodia Angkor Air will resume regular flights. Today, Meldy Mahinay joins us live from Cambodia. Meldy?
Hi, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Meldy. Go ahead.
Okay, here's the latest update. Churches have been resumed religious services after the 6 months closure and a ban on group gatherings to prevent the spread of COVID-19 was lifted on Saturday. According to the statement issued by the Health Ministry on Friday, the religious gatherings of Christians should strictly adhere to preventive health measures. Christian gatherings must adhere to the health guidelines, including the wearing of face masks, having temperature checks before entry, following the 1.5-meter social distancing rule, washing hands regularly, as well as carrying sanitizers according to the announcement. It said that attendees are also limited only to 30 minutes of worship per gathering, while children and sick are not advised to attend. Sat Teara, a member of the COSCOL Church Committee, said yesterday the resumption of church gatherings will help Christians to once again connect with our Lord Jesus Christ and it's wonderful new that we are once again able to warmly engage with one another. Our community was delighted to hear that we can resume religious gatherings, and we are extremely happy that once again begin services, she added. Tara also said that online worship had provided many challenges for a Christian and had been difficult to develop close bond and build relationship with one another. She added, when we practice online worship, we seem to have lost that close connection between members of our community. Ran Moni, a regular attendee of the Christian Fellowship Church of Cambodia, described the prospect of resuming religious gatherings as, I'm full of joy to be able to come back and meet everyone in the church, and I'm also looking forward to be able to celebrate the resumption of our religious ceremonies. As the health ministry also limited the attendance to gather for no longer than 30 minutes, Moni also addressed these challenges, saying, it is a bit difficult to follow these guidelines in a normal ceremony. The church leader will normally preach for about 30 minutes. However, he added, they need to be flexible since it's a health measures which aims to protect all of them. Moni said, the Christian Fellowship Church of Cambodia strictly complies with these health measures and religious gathering only for amounts of total of 20 people. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Tourism has announced that Cambodia Angkor Air will resume regular flights from today, September 15. The resumption of its operation, currently in line with the growing demand of domestic tourists, facilitated by Cambodia, being able to contain the spread of domestic COVID-19. The Ministry of Tourism hopes that Cambodia Angkor Air will consider reopening flights between Phnom Penh and Sihanouk and the time when the road traffic is getting congested because of these increasing numbers of vehicles. This is also a request from domestic tourists, tour operators, and as well as the investors. Domestic flights will commence to Siem Reap, Phnom Penh Sihanouk Ville on Wednesday and Fridays, while the international flights will start with Phnom Penh Guangzhou on Thursday. About the COVID-19 update, there has been one positive case of the novel coronavirus in Cambodia. After almost 2 weeks of no new cases, a 54-year-old British man, rising the country's total number to 275, no deaths, total recovered at 274. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Meldy, for your updates there in Cambodia. Meldy?
Okay. Thank you, Alma. Reporting live from Chom Chau, Cambodia. This is Meldy Mahinay. We live in interesting times.
UN Human Rights Office calls on Cambodia to stop resorting to unnecessary and excessive force and intimidation against those engaged in peaceful protests. Again, let's listen in.
The 31st of July, when a prominent trade unionist, Rong Chun, was arrested at his home in Phnom Penh by around 30 police officers, we have documented the arrest of 24 human rights defenders in Cambodia. And this includes 8 who were arrested in September alone so far. 13 of those arrested were subsequently released, reportedly after they signed agreements under duress to discontinue their human rights activities. 12 of them remain in detention, including one woman who was arrested immediately after leaving our office in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh, this past. Most of them face charges of incitement to commit felony, including 3 human rights environmental defenders. 2 of these were arrested after posting on Facebook their plans to walk to the Prime Minister's house to raise potential biodiversity and flooding concerns regarding the development of a lake. Numerous individuals have also reported receiving threatening phone calls, including death threats if they don't cease their human rights activism. They reported that they are being followed, and many are currently in hiding for fear of being arrested. We've also witnessed the unnecessary and excessive use of force by security forces against women demonstrators on at least 5 separate occasions in recent weeks. Most recently, on the 4th of September, a woman demonstrator was violently pushed to the ground and required hospitalization afterward. We've also documented the intimidation of those participating in peaceful demonstrations, including protesters calling for measures to alleviate the economic impact of COVID on livelihoods, as well as environmental activists and those demanding the release of detained human rights defenders. Current situation marks a deepening of the government's intolerance to dissent and repression of the rights to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and association. It is mainly directed at human rights organizations, environmentalists, and human rights defenders. Call on the government to immediately and unconditionally release those detained for the exercise of these rights, and to bring an end to the intimidation of civil society actors. We call on the security forces to stop resorting to unnecessary and excessive force and intimidation against those engaged in peaceful protests.
In response to these comments, Cambodianese.com reported that Mr. Pay Sempan, spokesman for the Cambodian government, in an interview on September 11, said that the Cambodian government welcomed criticism but strictly prohibits incitement and social unrest, having an obligation to assure security and maintain public order in the country. Regarding threats made against human rights activists, Mr. Sifan said that he could not accept claims that threats had been made against anyone's life, and that there was no concrete evidence of such threat. Myanmar's apparent continued targeting of civilians in the country's Rakhine and Chin states could constitute additional war crimes and crimes against humanity, according to the UN rights chief. Michelle Bachelet demanded action to remedy the serious rights violations suffered by Myanmar's Rohingya minority in particular. Take a look.
3 years have passed since the military operations in Rakhine created a terrible human rights crisis. The situation of many hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees and internally displaced people remains unresolved. In 2019, the fact-finding mission in Myanmar concluded that Myanmar incurred state responsibility under the Prohibition Against Genocide and Crimes Against Humanity, as well for other violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law. This Council and the General Assembly also emphasized the call for accountability, but regrettably no concrete measures have been taken. National initiatives, including secretive and selective court-martials and the National Commission of Inquiry, have been inadequate and fallen short of international standards. Currently, people from the Rakhine, Chin, Moro, Danyet, and Rohingya communities are increasingly affected by the armed conflict in Rakhine and Chin states, including through disappearances and extrajudicial killings of civilians, massive civilian displacement, arbitrary arrest, torture, and death in custody, and the destruction of civilian property. Civilian casualties have also been increasing. In some cases, they appear to have been targeted or attacked indiscriminately, which may constitute further war crimes or even crimes against humanity. It is troubling that a number of satellite images and eyewitness accounts indicate that areas in northern Rakhine have been burnt in recent months. I know that the government has contested this based on its own review of satellite data. This only underscores the need for independent, on-the-ground investigation. I'm also alarmed at continuing crackdowns on human rights defenders, journalists, and critics of the governments and army. And several laws related to the democratic space, which fall short of international standards, continue to be used, despite recommendations that they be reformed. Myanmar has repeatedly stated that it wishes to resolve the Rohingya crisis and ensure the Rohingya can return to their places of origin in dignity and safety. Action must now be taken to properly remedy the serious violations the Rohingyas have suffered and include them into the life of their country. Given Myanmar's stated commitment to democracy, I also encourage the government to remove the barriers that impede democratic freedoms and undermine the equal enjoyment of human rights by all in Myanmar.
China has locked down a city on the border with Myanmar and will launch a mass coronavirus testing program, according to officials, after a handful of infections were detected there. The 3 cases were found in the city of Ruli in western Yunnan province, a major land border crossing point with neighboring Myanmar. Now, city officials said in a statement Tuesday that residents were being told to stay home and people had been forbidden from entering or leaving the city from Monday evening. They said every resident would be tested for the virus in Ruli, which is home to more than 210,000 people. Businesses have been closed except for supermarkets, pharmacies, and food markets. Officials said the infections were brought in from Myanmar and Chinese authorities would crack down on illegal immigrants. In other news, President Duterte has signed into law the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, which provides for a 165.5 billion peso fund to finance the country's response and recovery interventions intended to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus disease pandemic. Let's listen in.
Nalagdaan na po bilang batas ng ating Pangulo nung Biyernes lamang ang RA 11494 o ang Bayanihan to Recover as One Act or yung tinatawag nating Bayanihan 2. Ngayon po, simulan po natin ang pagdidiscuss ng ilan sa mga salient points ng batas. Medyo mahaba po yung batas, mas mahaba kaysa sa Bayanihan 1. So para ngayon po, lilimitahan namin yung mga salient points doon sa number 1, saan mapupunta ang pondo at ano yung mga benepisyong maibibigay natin sa mga health workers. So ano po yung ilan sa mga salient points natin, no? Well, simulan po natin muna dito sa mga COVID-19 responses, no? Una po, magkakaroon po tayo ng 13.5 billion na ilalaan para sa health-related responses. Kasama rito ang tuloy-tuloy na employment at hiring ng emergency human resources for health, no? Pangalawa, ang augmentation ng operasyon ng DOH hospitals. Ang pagbibigay ng COVID-19 Special Risk Allowance sa mga public at private health workers na may direktang kontak sa mga pasyenteng may COVID-19 sa bawat buwan na sila ay nagsilbi sa panahon ng State of National Emergency na idineklara ng Presidente. Ang COVID-19 Special Risk Allowance ay in addition po sa actual hazard duty pay na ibinibigay sang-ayon po sa Magna Carta for Health Workers. Ang pagbibigay po ng life insurance, tirahan, transportasyon at pagkain sa lahat ng public at private health workers sa panahon ng State of National Emergency na idineklara ng ating Presidente regardless po sa quarantine status. Ang pagbibigay ng kompensasyon sa public at private health workers na nagkaroon ng COVID-19 habang naka-duty. Kung sakaling binuwian ng buhay ang health worker, 1 milyon pesos po ang ibibigay sa mga naiwan ng health worker. Kung sakaling magkakasakit na severe or critical, 100,000 ang nakalaan sa health workers. Para naman sa mild or moderate cases, mabibigyan po sila ng 15,000 pesos. Ang mga nabanggit po ay retroactive application mula sa 1 ng Pebrero ang taong kasalukuyan. Ang mga nasabing kompensasyon ay exempt po sa buwis at matatanggap ang nasabing kompensasyon na hindi lalampas ng 3 buwan pagkatapos ng PEDSA na pagkakahospital or pagkamatay. So hindi po natin sila pag-aantayin ng matagal. Kasama rin sa Bayanihan 2 ang pagbibigay ng personal protective equipment or PPEs tulad ng protective suit, face mask, shoe covers, face shields at goggles sa public at private COVID-19 referral hospitals, both national or local, mga barangays at iba pa pong mga indigent persons.
ASEAN in Focus, we'll be right back.
Do you want to earn a degree while you work? New Era University now offers Expanded Tertiary Education Equivalency and Accreditation Program, or ETIAP. ETIAP is an educational scheme that recognizes knowledge, skills, and prior learning obtained by individuals from non-formal and informal education experiences. It is implemented through deputized higher educational institutions like the New Era University that awards the appropriate degrees. Programs offered are the following: Master's Program, Masters of Arts in Education, major in Educational Management, Master's Program in Business Administration, Bachelor of Arts in Science, major in Political Science, Bachelor of Arts in Science, major in Mass Communication, Bachelor of Science in Education, major in Filipino, major in English, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration with majors in Human Resources Development, Marketing Management, and Financial Management. Beneficiaries must be Filipinos who have attained at least high school level of education. The program is flexible and you don't need to attend regular classes. Expanded Tertiary Education Equivalency and Accreditation Program, or ETIAP, is under the supervision of Dr. Nilo L. Rosas, the University President, and Professor Anita P. Santos, Director of ETIAP. For more information, contact the following: Cristina Moreno, 0995-138-0786, or email cvmoreno@meu.edu.ph, or Arlene Sarmiento, 0906-298-9150, or email cedctl@meu.edu.ph. What are you waiting for? Let New Era University be your partner in achieving your dreams.
It says the best defense is still containment.
We are in uncharted territory.
I told you 450. If I want to 100%. Maraming pa. Construction eh.
The Indonesian capital sees less traffic after authorities have reimposed a partial coronavirus lockdown and vowed to strictly isolate anyone testing positive for COVID-19 as infections soar in the metropolis. Take a look.
Baik sih, cuma kan ya kita kan harus berdagang juga dong. Kan kalau nggak berdagang kita nggak punya duit. Nggak punya duit makan apa? Kan gitu, penghasilan kan harus dijalanin. Terus harus mengikuti protokol kesehatan.
Iya, mohon sih seterusnya udah agak ringan, jangan sampai ya banyak berkumpul lagi. Mungkin dengan ada yang ketat gini, mungkin masyarakat bisa ngerti lah, paham gitu. Ya dari luar, dari Rawa Malaka paling banyak, Jembatan Besi, Kalianyar.
Kalau gitu mungkin ada masyarakat lagi?
Ya mungkin cukup lah. Ya mudah-mudahan dalam kayak kegiatan gini, ya kita juga namanya ya ada musibah gini ya, kita harus terima lah, peraturan gubernur juga kita harus taatin gitu.
As of Monday, Jakarta has reported more than 55,000 cases with nearly 1,500 deaths. Jakarta Governor Anies Baswedan said the city would resume large-scale social restrictions for 2 weeks. Starting Monday, yesterday, calling it a necessary measure to prevent the health system from collapsing. Non-essential businesses are only allowed to operate at 25% capacity. Restaurants can only serve takeaways, and schools, parks, and tourist spots have been ordered to shut. Anyone testing positive for COVID-19, including asymptomatic patients, will have to undergo mandatory quarantine in government facilities. Jakarta first introduced coronavirus restrictions in early April, but began relaxing them in June. Weeks later, however, the capital has seen a sharp increase in new COVID-19 cases. Thousands of soldiers and police are being deployed to enforce the restrictions that were often previously flouted. National COVID-19 Task Force Chief Donnie Monardo said 20 out of 67 COVID-19 referral hospitals in Jakarta had reported occupancy rates in their intensive care units at over 60%. And Indonesia's President Joko Widodo has announced that 15 hotels will now be used to quarantine COVID-19 patients with mild or no symptoms. And Singapore Airlines has started cutting about 4,300 jobs around 20% of its workforce due to the coronavirus, and warned any recovery would be long and fraught with uncertainty. SIA is the latest airline to announce massive layoffs as the global aviation industry faces its greatest ever crisis due to travel restrictions to fight the spread of the pandemic. The city-state's flag carrier said about 1,900 positions had already been eliminated in recent months due to a recruitment freeze, natural attrition, and voluntary departures, reducing further expected job cuts to around 2,400. Positions are being cut across full-service Singapore Airlines, regional carrier Silk Air, and budget airline Scoot in Singapore and overseas. Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung said the airline had delayed this workforce reduction as long as they can. But with air travel decimated by COVID-19, this has unfortunately become inevitable. He added that the government would strive to help impacted workers. Industry body, the International Air Transport Association, or IATA, estimates that airlines operating in the Asia-Pacific region stand to lose a combined $27.8 billion this year. IATA forecasts in July that global air traffic is unlikely to return to pre-coronavirus levels until at least 2024, a year later than previously projected. Coronavirus-ravaged economies across the Asia-Pacific will make a swoosh-shaped recovery next year. That is according to the Asian Development Bank forecast on Tuesday, but it warned that further restrictions to combat the contagion could derail the region's return to growth. The Philippines-based lender said developing Asia, stretching from the Cook Islands in the Pacific to Kazakhstan in Central Asia, is expected to contract in 2020 for the first time in nearly 6 decades, throwing tens of millions of people into poverty. It also said the 0.7% shrink in gross domestic product compares with the bank's previous estimate in June for 0.1% growth and will mark the first regional GDP contraction since the early 1960s. The downturn, it said, is across the board, with almost 3/4 of regional economies projected to contract, the largest such share in the past 6 decades, according to the bank in the latest update to its outlook. While the vast region is expected to bounce back next year, with GDP projected to grow 6.8%, it'll be substantially smaller than forecast before COVID-19 struck. The bank warned that reimposing tough virus restrictions could hamper the recovery and even trigger financial turmoil. A Thailand court on Monday approved the restructuring of Thai Airways, which is billions of dollars in debt and struggling to survive the coronavirus tourism crash. The global aviation sector was plunged into crisis by the pandemic as countries severely restricted travel, forcing airlines to ground vast numbers of planes and seek government help as they hemorrhaged cash. The kingdom, once a majority shareholder in Thai, reduced its stake in May and went to the insolvency court to resolve the airline's debt, which totaled 332.2 billion baht by the end of June, according to local media. Bangkok's Central Bankruptcy Court said Monday the problem that caused debtors' financial situation is not from its business but from the rapid change in aviation, particularly the impact from COVID-19. It approved Thai's request for a rehabilitation plan, which would see its debt and company organization restructured. Thai said after the ruling that it would propose that plan by the end of the year. Shares in the airline rallied more than 7% on Thailand's stock exchange Monday. The 4 rail services in Metro Manila implemented the East Physical Distancing Policy, increasing their passenger capacity by at least 30%. In a Facebook post, the Metro Rail Transit Line 3, or MRT3, said the reduced distance between passengers has increased its maximum capacity from 153 to 204, or 33.3% rise per train. The Light Rail Manila Corporation, or LRMC, operator of the Light Rail Transit Line 1, or LRT1, said the new policy also increased its passenger capacity from 155 to 204, that is 31.61%. The Philippine National Railways also recorded about 5% increase depending on the specific train unit. PNR's DMU Rotem trains now have a maximum passenger capacity of 164 from the previous 158, which is 3.8% increase. DMU 8000 trains at 154 from 148. DMU 8100 trains at 204 from 182. And EMU trains at 275 from 266. In the East Rule, physical distancing between commuters inside public transportation would be reduced from 1 meter to 0.75 meters starting September 14, provided that the no face mask, no face shield, no entry policy, as well as the no talking and no answering calls would be observed inside the public transport. The distancing would then be reduced to 0.5 meters on September 28 and 0.3 meters starting October 12. The said protocol is subject to change should there be any concern after the implementation, according to the DOTR. In other news, the Department of Foreign Affairs on Monday confirmed that no Filipino has been reported hurt by the recent forest fire incidents across the U.S. West Coast. Most of the deaths have occurred in California and Oregon, where the wildfires are the worst in decades and have been fueled partly by record heat. More than 30,000 firefighters are now battling the blazes, with wind gusts and drier weather on Monday, U.S. time, threatening more destructions. Residents of Arcadia on the outskirts of Los Angeles were ordered to evacuate on Sunday as the nearby Bobcat fire spread south through forested terrain towards the metropolis. 2 new deaths were confirmed from the North Complex fire, which swept at unprecedented speeds last week into areas already ravaged less than 2 years ago by the Camp Fire, California's deadliest ever blaze. Over the weekend, almost 100 forest fires hit the U.S. West Coast, which are expected to rise in number in the coming days due to high winds and dry conditions. President Duterte said he won't pay any reservation fee for COVID-19 vaccines because it is against the law. Let's listen in.
Would listen to us. The one good thing about China is you do not have to beg. You do not have to plead. Like in other countries, they want cash advance bago tayo deliveran ng vaccine. Eh kung ganon, patay tayong lahat. Every Filipino will die. I can assure you. Why? Kung wala tayong ibigay sa kanila cash advance, di walang vaccine. Di walang vaccine, di maghalik na lang tayo lahat para mas madali. That's I said one thing wrong with itong Western companies. Kaya sabi ko, we will give preference to Russia and China, provided that their vaccine is as good as any other in the market. It could be as good as yung mga kumpanya sinabi nila, hindi ko sasabihin, baka na magpapa-advertise sila. There's one thing wrong about the Western countries. It's all profit, profit, profit. Imagine there's a pandemic, and you say that, okay, we have something for sale or something to sell to you, and marinig mo, maligaya ka, only to be only to collapse when the next sentence is said, pero magbayad kayo ng cash advance bago kami magpada. Hindi pa nga eh. Nagkamali ako. Wala pa. Now, they are asking for parang reservation fee. Wala pa sila. Sabi nila, pag na-imbento na ito, natapos na namin yung trials, but anyway, they're really on the advanced stage of the clinical trials. Pero kung sabihin mo na, sige, wala pa yung vaccine, there is nothing with finality, and you want us to make a reservation by depositing money, you must be crazy. Hindi ako bakit ako magbili ng ganong style? Because the procurement law of the Philippines, this country, does not allow you to buy something which is non-existent or to be produced as yet. So yan ang, bakit ka naman magbayad na wala dyan? So, talagang, if the companies are here, are representatives, mag-uwi na kayo sa inyo. So, actually, at the end of the day, what happens is that they want you to finance the research and the perfection of the vaccine.
At least 6 former and current officials of the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, or PhilHealth, will now face charges for their involvement in the alleged anomalies in the government state insurer. In his public address on Monday, President Duterte also said the interagency task force led by the Department of Justice, which is investigating PhilHealth, made the recommendation after concluding its 30-day probe. Last month, President Duterte created a task force to look into the purported overpriced purchase of information and community technology, or ITC, equipment of PhilHealth. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said President Duterte approved the recommendation to file criminal and administrative charges against former PhilHealth CEO and President Ricardo Morales, who resigned last month to get treatment for his lymphoma. Other officials of PhilHealth to be sued are its Senior Vice President, Jovita Aragona, Information and Technology and Management Department, Acting Senior Manager Calixto Gabuya, Fund Management Sector Senior Vice President Renato Limsiaco, Senator Vice President Israel Pargas, Executive Vice President and concurrent OIC President and CEO Arnel De Jesus, among others. President Duterte noted that the said officials supposedly violated the anti-graft law, engaged in malversation of public funds or property, committed gross neglect, and violated the Internal Revenue Code and concealed important documents. ASEAN in Focus will be right back.
Ngayong Sabado sa Tagisan ng Galing.
Grabe, sa pool kami.
At least, good vibes, bilitan at boses na pangmalakasan ang mangingibabaw ngayong Sabado. Kaya naman, tutok na sa Tagisan ng Galing Part 2 Singing Edition.
Tagisan ng Galing Part 2 is co-presented by Cooper, an expert in air conditioning and electromechanical, also engaged in structural, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, and sanitary services. Cooper, your ultimate MEPS and air conditioning solutions. Unlad Incorporated International, fight against global poverty. Canrib Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Our sponsors, BDO, we find ways. JRC Industrial Sales, RS Square Variables Incorporated, your trusted UPS supplier and UPS maintenance provider in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. RJK Services Manpower Agency Corporation, Robes Builders, Villa Cáceres, Chris Rack Enterprises, Victory Carpentry, DOP Asiatic Pest Control Services, and AUB, Aspire for the Future, in partnership with New Era University ETAP, Expanded Tertiary Education, Equivalency and Accreditation Program. Embrace Cafe, we embrace differently abled persons.
Oh my goodness! It's good to be back! Orly magtanggol po. Orly for sure. OFW at your service. Mabuhay ka, kabayan. Anak!
Hello, beautiful. I'm Darius Magtanggol. Papa Di po siya. Tatay ni Orly, original singer, heartthrob ng cruise ship.
Pwede ho ba magtanong? Sino ho ako? Alam ko na ho. Ako nga ho pala si Eva Magtanggol. Mrs. po ako ni Darius. Yes, ma'am. Nandito na po. Dala ko na po yung makeup kit, face mask, face shield. Eh, ma'am, baka gusto mo rin bumili ng ganisa. Murang-mura lang. Hello! Ako si Angeline Morales. You can call me Angie for short. Umorder na kayo.
No. No me gusta ese chico. I don't like him. Nosotros tenemos sangre royal. Ako, si Gladys Morales. Yo soy la mamá de Angie.
Okay. So book na sila? Ako nang bahala sa passport nila. Eh, kanina pa tayo nag-uusap eh. Di mo ako kilala? I'm Manager Cynthia ng mga Senti Boys at Kadobols. Just call me Manager.
When I think I'm going out of my
Efraim Montes po. Mga bro, ayusin nyo naman ang tono at kanta nyo dyan.
Alvin Olala po. Ma'am sir, swabe boses ko, di ba?
Baka siya. Ako. Hello, Mans. Joel Trinidad po. Okay, ito.
Eh di ako na. Lord Mendoza po. Ang malayelong boses sa lahat. O Ege! Ege ka! Bahala ka sa buhay mo! Ege!
Para sa'yo, ang laban na to, Ronnie Herman po, ang kadobol ni Manny Pacquiao.
Chita eh! Ganda lalaki! Gilbert Orsini po! Kadobol ni Rene Riquezas!
At siya naman po, si Jonathan!
Ang kadobol ni Christopher De Leon!
Makigulo! Makitawa!
At makipagkantahan kasama natin ang ating mga OFW dito lang sa
Saya!
Welcome back. Apple fans and photography enthusiasts flocked to Marina Bay for the opening of a new store, the first Apple store to sit directly on the water. Take a look.
First day. It's my first time ever to be in an Apple shop for the first day of this operation. So if you're a fan, goosebumps, like, wow. And then you go up the escalators like, oh. It's really beautiful, yeah.
I would say that it's one of the very rare opportunity to join an Apple Store grand opening, and especially for the such a unique Apple Store design, the first glass box that float on the water. So yeah, that is a really exciting experience.
Opening, then you can really feel the excitement from the employees as they bring in this new store, which is a great addition to MBS. I could really hear them cheering, and really makes me feel special as a customer.
The building, formerly home to a nightclub, is a glass dome that appears to float on the water set against Singapore's iconic skyline. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.